Hey everybody, ready to hit the road. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into van life, but not the picture perfect Instagram version. We're talking about like the nitty gritty reasons why so many people are saying sayonara to their vans and like coming back to normal life.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? Like on the
hmm
surface, van life seems like the ultimate escape. Freedom, adventure, beautiful landscapes. But just like almost everything in life, the reality is way more complicated.
Totally. So to really get into like WHY this van life exodus is happening, we're checking out this YouTube video. It's from these van lifers, Kels and Jay. The video is called "The Real Reason Everyone is Quitting Van Life." And these guys actually lived the van life dream for 2 whole years. First in a converted bus and then a van. So they've like seen it all, from the honeymoon phase to the harsh realities.
Yeah, and what really struck me was like the cyclical nature of their experience. Build a van travel for a bit, sell it, and then just repeat the whole process over and over. Why do you think that pattern is so common? That's a good question. Well, Kels and Jay actually break down the van life experience into 6 phases, kind of like the stages of a relationship. And just like with a relationship, it can start with intense passion and excitement.
Oh, totally. Like that honeymoon phase, right?
Yeah.
Everything is new and exciting. You're on the open road. You're exploring these amazing places,
Yeah.
living a life most people only dream of.
Yeah. And Kels and Jay, they were all about that bus life initially. Like they felt they needed the space and that it would make travel so much easier. But then just like a lot of couples, they hit some bumps in the road.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that's where things get interesting. Breakdowns, constant repairs, the stress of driving this huge vehicle, it all starts to add up.
Yeah, for sure. So even though they loved that bus life, they ended up downshifting to a van. It was still exciting, don't get me wrong, but it's a clear sign that their initial expectations were like shifting.
Yeah, that downshift. It says a lot about the challenges of van life. It's not always about having the biggest or fanciest rig.
hmm
Sometimes practicality wins out. But even with a smaller setup, the challenges don't just disappear.
Nope. And that's when those breaks become necessary. Kels and Jay weren't like giving up on van life completely, but they needed pauses, like time to regroup and reassess.
And those breaks often happen for like the same reasons. Regardless of who you are or what kind of van you have, money for starters is a huge factor.
Oh, yeah, big time. It's way too easy to underestimate the cost of van life. Gas maintenance repairs, and like, don't forget about trying to earn an income while you're on the road. Oh, and let's not forget those unexpected expenses that always seem to pop up at the worst possible time, like a blown tire in the middle of nowhere,
Oh, yeah.
or like a sudden engine
Oh,
issue.
yeah, totally. And it's not even just those like obvious costs. For someone who's brand new to van life, there are so many hidden costs. Things like insurance specific to converted vehicles or campsite fees when you can't find a good boondocking spot. Boondocking, by the way, is just van life lingo for camping for free, usually on public lands.
It's like any big life decision. You got to do your research and budget realistically. Van life isn't about escaping responsibilities, it's about managing them in a totally different setting.
For sure. And speaking of responsibilities, life circumstances also play a huge role in why people quit van life. Having kids needing stable schooling for them, or just craving a sense of community, all those things can make long-term nomadism so challenging.
So true. It's not always just about you and your wanderlust. Sometimes there are other people and commitments to think about, and I know this is a big one for a lot of folks out there. So how did Kels and Jay deal with needing a community on the road?
Well, they talked about how important the van life community was for them. It gave them a sense of belonging and support, which is so important when you're constantly moving around. But there's also a flip side of that.
Yeah, I bet. The constant goodbyes, right? You meet all these awesome people and then you have to say farewell. It's got to be emotionally draining.
Yeah, totally. And this is where your personality comes in. If you're an introvert who thrives on being alone, maybe you'd handle those goodbyes differently
hmm
than someone who like craves being around people all the time.
That's such a good point. It makes me wonder if there are certain personality types that are better suited for van life.
Hmm. That's a really interesting question. There are probably some traits that make it easier to adapt to this lifestyle, like being flexible, resourceful, maybe even having a bit of a DIY spirit.
Yeah, for sure. They also mentioned something I thought was really insightful. The burden of staying with people even when you're welcomed, feeling like a bum even when you're contributing. That's an aspect of van life that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, it's true. It's such a complicated social dynamic. On one hand, you're relying on the generosity of other people, but on the other hand, you want to keep that sense of independence and self-sufficiency.
It's like you're walking a tightrope, trying to find that balance between connection and autonomy.
Exactly. And sometimes, despite all those incredible experiences and the connections you make, You start craving something more permanent.
Like roots, even with all that freedom.
Hmm.
Kels and Jay felt this pull towards stability, especially as they got older. They even mentioned dealing with rising interest rates and needing like a more consistent income.
Right. It just shows that it's a universal human need. We crave that sense of belonging, a
Mm.
place to call home, even if that home is on wheels. It's not about running away from adulting. It's just adulting in a different way.
I think that's such an important takeaway for anyone thinking about van life. It's not this magical cure for all of life's problems. It's just a different way of experiencing them. You're still dealing with bills, relationships, and all the ups and downs of being human.
Totally. It's all about being realistic about your expectations and understanding that van life comes with its own set of trade-offs. And sometimes those trade-offs lead you back to a more conventional lifestyle, at least for a little while.
I see. But what about that travel bug? Once you've had a taste of that freedom, is it even possible to really go back?
Well, that's where Jay's perspective comes in. He really believes that once you get that travel bug, it never really goes away. It's like an addiction.
Hmm. So how do you deal with that addiction? Is it about finding a balance, like a way to incorporate travel and adventure into your life without completely turning it upside down?
That's the million-dollar question. And one we'll dig into as we go deeper into Kels and Jay's story.
Yeah.
It's like you open this door to a whole new way of living. And even when you step back from it for a bit, that door is still there, like cracked open.
Right. And Kels and Jay are like the perfect example of that. They may have left van life, but they actually channeled that passion into a van building business.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. It's a really smart way to stay connected to that community and share their expertise with others who are like drawn to this lifestyle.
Totally. But they still miss the open road, like the simplicity of life on wheels. Jay even compared it to like an addiction. So what do you think is behind that feeling, that pull to keep moving?
Well, from a psychological perspective, there's something so appealing about novelty and exploration. Our brains are literally wired to seek out new experiences. It's how we learn and grow as people.
So is van life kind of tapping into that primal urge to explore? That wanderlust that's been a part of us like for centuries?
Absolutely. Think about our nomadic ancestors. They were constantly on the move, searching for food and resources. That drive to explore is like deeply ingrained in us.
Wow. So maybe van life is like a modern expression of that ancient instinct, but is it sustainable long term? Can we really be nomads forever?
That is the question, isn't it? I think Kels and Jay's story gives us some really valuable insights. They haven't given up on travel completely, but they found a way to blend it into a more like grounded lifestyle.
It's like they've found that compromise, a way to balance wanderlust with the need for stability and a home base.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings up another question. Is it really a compromise, or have they just evolved into a different phase of their journey?
That's deep. Because if van life is like a relationship, like they said, maybe it's not about finding the one perfect way of living, but like navigating those different stages and figuring out what works best for you at different points in your life.
Yeah, I love that. Just like relationships evolve, so do our lifestyles and priorities.
Totally. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about sticking to this rigid definition of van life, but being open to how it can change and adapt as we do.
It's about finding a way to live authentically, whether that means hitting the road full time, or weaving travel into a more traditional lifestyle, or even just embracing that nomadic mindset in our everyday lives.
I love that. A nomadic mindset. It's not just about the van. It's about being open to new things, embracing the unknown and constantly learning and growing.
And that can happen anywhere, not just on the open road.
So true. Speaking of the open road, there's one aspect of van life that Kels and Jay didn't really touch on in their video, but it's something we can't ignore. The environmental impact, all that travel, all that fuel consumption, it adds up.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get swept up in the romanticism of van life, but we have to be aware of our footprint.
Yeah, because true freedom, it doesn't just come from breaking free from like societal norms. It comes from making choices that are in line with our values, including our commitment to the planet.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to make van life more sustainable. Choosing a fuel-efficient vehicle, minimizing waste, opting for eco-friendly products, and being mindful of our energy use.
And even thinking about where we travel. Do we always need to drive those long distances? Or can we explore closer to home and cut down on the mileage? Can we choose destinations that promote sustainable tourism and like support local communities?
Those are all really important things to consider. It's about shifting our mindset from just consuming experiences to actively participating in a way that minimizes harm and benefits places we visit.
It's like finding that sweet spot where our passion for adventure meets our responsibility to the planet.
And that's a challenge worth taking on.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, we want our adventures to leave a positive mark,
Mhm.
not just on our own lives, but on the world around us.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? It seems like a lot of folks think van life is all about ditching responsibility. But what Kels and Jay are saying is like, it's more about taking ownership of your life. It's about making a conscious choice about how you want to live, even with all the crazy challenges that come with it.
Yeah, and like choosing those challenges, right? It's like, okay, maybe I don't have to deal with a leaky faucet anymore, but now I got to figure out how to fix my solar panels in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
Takes a whole different set of skills,
Well, totally. It's a different kind of
for
resourcefulness.
sure.
And that can be so empowering. You're not relying on landlords or utility companies or any of that. You're figuring things out for yourself. And that self-reliance can be really transformative.
I can see that. So what do you think? Is van life ultimately like a young person's game?
Hmm.
Kels and Jay seem to have moved on to something a little more stable as they've gotten older. Is there like a natural progression there? That's a good question. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, how our priorities change as we move through life. Maybe in your 20s, you're all about pushing limits and chasing the unknown. But as you get older, maybe you want something different, like a different kind of stability, something that lets you build something that lasts.
Yeah, like Kels and Jay with their van building business, they're still plugged into the van life world. They're sharing what they know, and they're creating something real and tangible. It might not be the open road, but it's a different kind of adventure for sure.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that van life isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. It can be different for everyone. And it can change as you change. Maybe you start with a cross-country road trip. Then you move to shorter adventures. Maybe you even settle down and build a tiny house somewhere.
So it's not about being a nomad forever. It's about taking those pieces of freedom and adventure and making them a part of your life in a way that fits you.
You got it. And remember, even if you never even step foot in the van, you can still have that nomadic mindset. Be curious. Explore your own neighborhood. Step outside your comfort zone. And always keep looking for new experiences. That's the heart and soul of van life, no matter where you end up each night.
I love that. What a great way to wrap things up. So, to everyone listening, whether you're a seasoned van lifer or just starting to dream about hitting the road, remember this: van life isn't just about the van, it's about the life you choose to create, no matter where that might be. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep that nomadic spirit alive.
Thanks for joining us on this deep